Welcome once more, horror lovers. Evil and madness can take many forms, and you never know which one will they be taking at the moment. It isn't always a person or a creature. Sometimes we can even be threatened by objects or entire buildings. This is the story of a family who couldn't see danger coming, despite having it right in front of their noses. It all started with a family that had to move out to start a new life in the city, since the father was getting a new job there. They chose to live in an old house in the outskirts, recently renovated with all the luxuries. It stood out due to its beautiful front. It had large rooms and a well-conserved garden. And although it still had that ancient house atmosphere, everything there seemed to be perfect. Except for one tiny detail, which immediately made the wife and her children feel uncomfortable. It was a huge painting hanging before the entrance hall. It was a portrait of a noble gentleman, surely one of the old occupants of the house, who had a mocking and despicable smile on his face. On one hand, he held a hunting rifle, while his other hand was raised up and closed in a fist. And despite the reluctance of his family, the father decided to keep the painting right where it was, because according to him, it gave an air of elegance to the hall. Besides, they were too busy unpacking. There were still many things and furniture to take care of. Later on, they would organize everything and decide what would stay and what would leave the house. However, the next morning, those plans were ruined by tragedy. When the father woke up, he experienced the most horrible surprise of his life. His wife lay dead right by his side. It was as if she had had a heart attack while she slept. He hadn't noticed and couldn't do anything to help her. Sunk in shock, the family held a funeral for her and went back home, without realizing that the man in the painting now had one of his fingers extended. They tried to overcome the grief and keep going forward with the unpacking. However, a few days later, the desperation came back when suddenly the youngest child got terribly ill and had to be hospitalized. It all happened very quickly, and the next morning, the father came back home, crushed and defeated, to tell his remaining children that their little sibling had passed away. And for the first time, the father looked at the painting with a corner of his eye. He didn't remember the man having two of his fingers extended. Barely recovering after the second loss, misery kept on ravaging the family, as the daughter died by drowning in the bathtub after falling and hitting her head. And in the middle of that hell, the father once again looked at the painting. Now he was sure that the man had a third finger extended. He couldn't believe it. Something supernatural was going on. That being and that house were killing them all, one by one. But if he decided to tell anyone, who would ever believe him? Desperate, the father started drinking too much and ended up being fired from his job. They soon ran out of money and had to abandon that property. Him and his only son left ended up in the streets without a home. However, that house and the man in the painting wouldn't let them get away so easily. Due to the neglect of his father, the boy also started getting into trouble, and one day, while committing a robbery, had a car crash while trying to escape, losing his life. The father ended up empty, completely broken inside. He had no family and no reason to live. And all because of that evil man in the painting, who was now smiling more than ever with a sinister grimace and 4 fingers extended. Filled with rage, the father got matches and a large canister of gasoline, ready to burn down that diabolical object. When he tried to burn it, the fire quickly extended through the entire house, but the painting seemed to repel the flame somehow. When the neighbors discovered the fire, they called the firemen, but it was too late. The father had burned to death. The next day, they checked the scorched rubble left of the house to see if any of the family's belongings could be saved. Absolutely nothing was left. Everything had been reduced to ashes. The only thing they found was a huge painting with a portrait of an old nobleman ready to hunt. enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!